Welcome to American History Live's podcast. Every other week, I, Abigail Adams, will discuss American Revolutionary history and the foundations of our great nation. Today, I have a very special guest, one of the other historical figures available here at American History Live, founder of African Freemasonry, patriot, abolitionist, educator. Welcome, Prince Hall. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Mrs. Adams. Thank you for having me with you today.
Today, Mr. Hall and I will be discussing Phillis Wheatley, a woman who rose above unspeakable trials to become an amazing patriot. Mr. Hall, can you share about Miss Wheatley's early life?
Miss Wheatley was born in Africa, a free person, but she was captured and sold into slavery at the age of 7. She was sent on a long journey from Africa to the American colony of Massachusetts in 1761. Not only did Miss Wheatley lose her family and freedom, but Miss Wheatley almost died on the trip. She was given a very low chance of survival, and her captors asked for less money than normal. She was sold to John and Susanna Wheatley in Boston and taken in as a household slave. The Wheatleys soon recognized her intelligence, and she learned how to read and write.
This was quite unusual for an enslaved person. In many places, educating slaves was illegal.
Yes, and at the age of 14, Miss Wheatley discovered her true passion, poetry. She published her first poem in 1767. Then, in 1770, she published her famous and elegiac poem on the death of the celebrated divine George Whitefield. In 1773, Phillis Wheatley traveled to London to share her poems and publish her first book, poems on various subjects, religious and moral. This was the first time any African American had a book published. It included a foreword signed by John Hancock and other Bostonians.
John Hancock, president of the Second Continental Congress, signer of the Declaration of Independence. This gave the book publicity and legitimacy. Notably, a picture was included so that others could see it was indeed written by an African American woman. But Phillis Wheatley was not yet free.
No, she was not. Miss Wheatley was freed by manumissions in 1774. Miss Wheatley was granted freedom by her slaveholders without payment voluntarily. She continued to write poetry as a free woman. Her poems reflected proudly her African roots and her faith. Protestants in both America and England read her work.
Both slaveholders and abolitionists read her poems. Slaveholders used the poems to try to convert their slaves. Abolitionists used the poems as proof of the intellectual abilities of persons of color.
Phillis Wheatley also supported the American Revolutionary Movement.
Yes, she did. In 1776, Miss Wheatley wrote her most famous poem, To His Excellency George Washington. This included, Proceed, great chief, with virtue on thy side. Thy every action let the goddess guide. A crown, a mansion, a throne that shine, with gold unfading, Washington be thine.
George Washington himself read this poem and wrote Phillis Wheatley a thank you note praising her great poetic talents. He asked her to meet with him while he was in Boston with the army, and she did.
Miss Wheatley went on to publish over 100 poems, many of which had to do with the American nation and freedom. She helped convince many people to support the independence movement through her poetry. But she firmly believed that America would never truly be free until the evil practice of slavery ended for all.
Phillis Wheatley demonstrated that intelligence and creativity do not know color, background, or gender. She used her gifts to extend the ideas of liberty to all people.
Thank you, Mr. Hall, for joining us today.